This year's International Conference of Police Chiefs was held just this past weekend over in the city of San Diego, California. And during this year's conference, the current head of the FBI, Mr. Christopher Wray, he came out and he warned the police chiefs of the whole world, and particularly the ones here in the U.S., about the serious possibility of domestic terrorism here in America as a direct consequence of the war that's currently taking place over in Israel. Here's specifically what he said. Quote, "The threat is very much ongoing, and in fact, the threat picture continues to evolve. Here in the U.S., we cannot and do not discount the possibility that Hamas or other foreign terrorist organizations could exploit the conflict to call on their supporters to conduct attacks on our own soil." During the speech, he then went on to say that the FBI is moving quickly to mitigate these threats. Now, he didn't mention exactly how, but potentially, the FBI might have started shifting those FBI agents who are currently surveilling conservative parents who speak out at school board meetings to instead have those agents surveil supporters of Hamas. That is just my guess, though. Regardless, while speaking with the chiefs of the police, Director Wray, he did mention that the war that's happening over in the Middle East right now is creating an environment which may inspire some people here in America whose internal ideology aligns with that of Hamas to wreak havoc on our own home soil. Quote, "In this heightened environment, there's no question we're seeing an increase in reported threats, and we have to be on the lookout, especially for lone actors who may take inspiration from recent events to commit violence of their own. And I'd encourage you to stay vigilant, because as the first line of defense in protecting our communities, you are often the first to see the signs that someone may be mobilizing to violence. And I'd also ask you to continue sharing any intelligence or observations you may have." And indeed, America is currently facing two separate avenues regarding these sorts of terror threats. You have the under the radar side, and then you have the out in the open side. In terms of the terror threat that is flying under the radar, well, over the past several years now, the number of illegal border crossers has just inundated the whole country. And the numbers, when you look at them, are truly staggering. Since Joe Biden took office, Border Patrol agents have arrested over 7 million people who crossed the border illegally, with many of them getting a court date and just being released into the interior of the U.S. 7 million people. And that's, by the way, just the ones who were actually apprehended trying to cross the border. The true number of people, including the ones who were never caught, well, is impossible to know. It could easily be double that. Regardless, just with the ones we know about, there were 7 million people. If all those illegals formed their own state here in the country, it would be America's 13th largest state by population, right after Arizona. And unlike what the mainstream legacy news outlets would have this country believe, the people coming across the border are not just from Mexico and Latin America. Included among these illegal migrants are those from the Middle East, as well as those who are already on the FBI watch list. In fact, according to the latest data from Customs and Border Protection, in the 2-year period between October of 2021 and this month, October of 2023, Border Patrol agents arrested over 30,000 people from Turkey, over 15,000 people from Mauritania, over 13,000 Uzbeks, over 6,000 Afghans, 3,000 Egyptians, 1,600 Pakistanis, over 600 Iranians, over 500 Syrians, 185 people from Jordan, 164 people from Lebanon, 123 people from Iraq, 139 people from Yemen, and so on and so forth. And notably, this data from Border Patrol, it did not include information on whether or not these Middle Eastern illegal migrants were removed from the country or whether they were released into the interior of the U.S. with a court date. Furthermore, out of the people who were actually caught, there were quite a few who were already on the terror watch list. Quote, "Fiscal year 2023 broke the record for encounters on the FBI terror watch list, with 151 people encountered at the southern border between ports of entry, higher than the previous 6 years combined." Meaning that just in this fiscal year alone, there were more people encountered at the U.S. southern border who were already on the FBI's terror watch list than the previous 6 years combined. And also, this all goes without saying that all these people from Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, and so on, these were all the people who were actually caught. It might not be a stretch of the imagination to double that number in terms of the people who got into the country without getting caught. In fact, our reporter, who's been down at the border for the last several years, she was able to acquire some footage from Arizona showing this, what appears to be a Middle Eastern man with an entourage of armed guards crossing into Arizona on a caravan of horses. Now, it's impossible to know who that man is, but it's not a stretch of the imagination to consider that these higher-level terrorists have the resources to spend $20, $30, $40, even $50,000 to hire these armed guards to cross the border without getting noticed, especially given the fact that it's been known for a long, long time now that the cartels work alongside these terrorist organizations already to traffic drugs. Here's, for instance, what a special agent of the DEA said when he was explaining how terrorist networks like Hezbollah work alongside the Mexican cartels.
Of the 68 FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations designated by the State Department, DEA has linked 25 of those to some form of drug trafficking or role in the drug trade. If you notice, IRGC was added last year in 2018.
And so, if they already have these working relationships in place to smuggle vast amounts of drugs, well, sneaking in a few dozen or perhaps a few hundred individual people isn't much of a stretch. In fact, just along that line, our Southern Border reporter recently had a chance to speak with Mr. Mark Morgan. He was the former acting director of Customs and Border Protection, and frankly, when speaking to our reporter, he did not mince words. Here's exactly what he told us. And by the way, as you're listening to this, just keep in mind that this man was an FBI agent for 20 years before being put in charge of U.S. Border Patrol. He was then later put in charge of ICE before becoming the acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection under President Trump. And here's what he said, quote, "The same terrorists that just carried out this horrific attack on Israel, their hatred and their unwavering commitment to do harm to the United States is alive and well. Nobody in their right mind can say that our border is secure. It's coming. It's coming. No one can predict, but what I will say is there could already be a cell in the United States planning the next terrorist attack, and we would have no idea." That's a fair statement. That's not hyperbolic. We have people in our own country that are actually supporting Hamas, supporting the actions of babies being decapitated, of being burned alive, of women being savagely raped and videotaped. When you have this deep-rooted, irrational ideology to be inspired to move to radicalization, then action can be very quick. Generally, it takes an event, and we have that now. Now, this story gets a lot deeper, which we'll get into right after I introduce the sponsor of today's episode by showing you this little piece of money. Or rather, I should say that this is fake money being printed into oblivion by those geniuses over in Washington, D.C. And so before they completely obliterate your life savings, what I recommend you do is to convert that fake money into real money, which is physical gold and silver. And the best company to use is the sponsor of today's episode, American Hartford Gold, who also happens to be my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. They have thousands of other 5-star ratings across the country. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They ship quickly, directly to your doorstep. Their product listings are awesome. They're stacked with great options of gold and silver bullion and coins, and they have amazing customer service. When you pick up the phone and call them, you feel good knowing you support a company that supports the truth getting out into the wider American audience. And so calling them up is a no-brainer. But best of all, if you tell them that Roman sent you, they will throw in up to $5,000 worth of free silver with your first purchase. It's 866-242-2352, or you can simply text the word Roman, R-O-M-A-N, Roman, to 65532. Of course, all their details will be down in the description box below. And now, let's head on back to the studio. And indeed, what he mentioned there about the people in our country who actively and very openly support Hamas is very accurate. In fact, shortly after the terrorist attacks against Israel, well, you had cities and university campuses all across America host these large public demonstrations in support of Hamas. In fact, you can see some of the demonstrations up on your screen right now. There were protests and marches with hundreds of people across the whole country, in New York City, in Atlanta, in Chicago, in Denver, and San Diego, in Washington, D.C., as well as in a plethora of different college campuses, like on Harvard, Columbia, UCLA, George Mason, Washington University, among literally dozens of other schools. Also, you had similar situations playing out across the whole Western world, over in Australia, Paris, Germany, Vienna, Amsterdam, London, and so on and so forth. And so this is where things currently stand, where you have global calls being made for terrorism. You have the cartels alongside the southern border working alongside known terrorist organizations to smuggle drugs. You have a porous southern border, which is now allowing quite literally millions of people to pour into the country. And then you add to that the seemingly mainstream ideological alignment between Hamas and the general political left, and what you're left with is a proverbial powder keg of a situation, with the FBI director now himself warning the police chiefs across the whole country to step up their levels of alert. And this will likely all be escalated even further in the coming weeks, as Israel plans to occupy Gaza, as the U.S. has now a strong naval presence over in the Mediterranean, and as 2,000 U.S. troops have just been told to prepare for a potential deployment to Israel in order to provide advisement as well as medical support. And so perhaps you should take all this as a great reminder to keep your head on a swivel in the days ahead. If you'd like to read through anything that we went through in today's episode, including the statement from the FBI director, I'll throw all that down into the description box below this video for you to peruse at your own leisure, which I should mention is that description box right below those like and subscribe buttons, both of which I hope you take a quick moment to smash. Then lastly, if you are watching this episode and you think to yourself, man, I wish Roman published more episodes of Facts Matter every single week for me to enjoy, well, you're in luck, because I do. Over on Epoch TV, our no censorship video platform, I publish every single week somewhere between 1 to 3 exclusive episodes of Facts Matter, usually regarding topics that aren't welcome here on YouTube. And so if you'd like to check out those episodes, including a huge backlog from the last 2 or 3 years, and also there's a ton of other great shows on there as well, like Crossroads, American Thought Leaders, California Insider, among many others, all of which report things honestly without having to, well, self-censor in order to accommodate some 22-year-old purple hair, latte sipping person in Silicon Valley who has the power to just censor us on this platform. And so again, if you're tired of all the censorship and if you want to get access to some of the best content on the web, check out the Epoch Times. The current sale is just 25 cents a week for the whole year, which if you do the math, works itself out to just be $1 a month. And so if you've been on the fence about trying the Epoch Times, now is a great opportunity for, again, just $1 a month. The link will be right there at the top of the description box below. You can just click on that link and head on over to the sale page where you can try it for yourself. Of course, you can cancel anytime, but I'm sure that you won't. I'm sure that you'll love it and be a subscriber for a long, long, long time to come. Again, that link is right there at the top of the description box below. I hope you check it out. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed. Most importantly, stay free.